Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when we expect signs to be grand and unmistakable, earth-shattering revelations that leave no doubt in our minds. We long for neon lights flashing with clear instructions, for a booming voice that tells us exactly what to do next. But more often than not, the most profound signs from God arrive in the quiet, in the subtle, in ways so gentle that we almost miss them. They are not always wrapped in the spectacular. Instead, they whisper to us in ways that require us to slow down, listen, and trust. Think about the way nature speaks. A sunrise does not announce itself with sirens and trumpets, yet it marks the beginning of a brand new day full of possibility. A seed does not crack through the soil with a sudden explosion, yet deep beneath the surface, growth is happening in ways unseen. This is how God often speaks, through the gradual, the understated, the whispers over the thunder. The challenge is not whether the signs exist, but whether we are tuned in enough to recognize them. There is a story in the Bible about the prophet Elijah, a man who had seen the power of God in extraordinary ways. He had called down fire from heaven, witnessed miracles, and stood against powerful opposition. Yet, when he was at his lowest, feeling afraid and abandoned, he went up to a mountain, seeking God's voice. And what happened? A powerful wind tore through the mountains, but God was not in the wind. Then, an earthquake shook the ground, but God was not in the earthquake. After that, a fire raged, but God was not in the fire. And then, finally, came a gentle whisper. And in that whisper, Elijah found the presence of God. How often do we assume that if something is not loud, dramatic, or immediate, it must not be real? How many times have we ignored the quiet nudges because we were waiting for a louder confirmation? The truth is, the whisper is just as powerful, perhaps even more so, because it requires faith to follow. When God speaks in the quiet, He is inviting us to lean in closer, to trust Him in a way that does not rely on overwhelming evidence, but on an intimate knowing deep within our souls. Sometimes the whisper comes in the form of an unshakable feeling that we are meant for more, a longing that refuses to fade no matter how many times we try to dismiss it. It may come through a conversation with a friend that unexpectedly speaks to exactly what we've been praying about. A passage in a book that feels like it was written just for us. A door closing, not as punishment, but as redirection towards something better. These are the signs we must learn to recognize, the ones that often carry the deepest significance because they require us to trust what we cannot always see. But here is where it gets difficult. Listening for the whisper requires stillness, and stillness is not always comfortable. We live in a world that thrives on noise, on constant motion, on immediate answers. If something isn't happening fast enough, we assume it's not happening at all. If we don't hear an answer right away, we assume God is silent. But what if His silence is not an absence, but an invitation? What if, in the waiting, He is drawing us closer to Him so that we don't just seek signs, but we seek Him? Think about a time when you were searching for direction, and instead of receiving a loud, clear answer, you felt only a quiet sense of peace about a certain path. Maybe nothing dramatic confirmed it, but something within you knew it was the right step. That peace, that quiet certainty, is often how God speaks. It does not demand attention the way chaos does, but it carries a weight that cannot be ignored. This is why so many breakthroughs are missed, not because they are not there, but because they do not arrive in the way we expect. We assume that transformation must come in an instant, that God's guidance must be delivered in grand gestures, but in reality, the most powerful shifts often begin with the smallest whispers, the right word at the right time, a persistent feeling that refuses to go away. A moment of stillness, where everything finally makes sense. There is a reason the Bible says, "Be still and know that I am God." Not work harder, not figure everything out on your own, not chase after every loud and obvious sign. Just be still. In the stillness, in the quiet, we find that the signs were there all along. We just needed to slow down long enough to notice them. When we stop demanding that God speak in ways that fit our expectations, we open ourselves up to receiving Him in ways that exceed them. His whispers are everywhere, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. They may not come with flashing lights or the certainty of immediate answers, but they come with something even greater, the promise that He is always speaking, always guiding, always closer than we think. There is a moment in every journey when the struggle feels unbearable, when the weight of waiting, of hoping, of fighting for something that still seems out of reach becomes almost too much to carry. It is in these moments that we are tempted to believe the breakthrough will never come, that maybe we misheard, maybe we misunderstood, maybe we are not meant to step into the promise after all. The doubts creep in, whispering that if something was truly meant for us, it would not be this hard. That if God was really moving, we wouldn't feel stuck in the same place, circling the same struggles, waiting for doors that never seem to open. But history, both in the stories of faith and in the stories of life, tells us something different. It tells us that the moment right before everything changes is often the moment that feels the heaviest. The longest nights come before the morning. The fiercest battles happen just before the victory. The greatest resistance arises just before the breakthrough. This is not coincidence. It is the nature of transformation. Think about the process of childbirth. The most intense pain, the most exhausting moments, the ones that push a person to their absolute limit, come just before the birth itself. The moment of transition, when the new thing is about to enter the world, is the moment that feels most unbearable. And yet, it is also the moment when everything is closest to completion. If you only focused on the pain, you might believe it would last forever. But the truth is, the pain is not proof of delay, it is proof that something is coming. This pattern repeats itself in every area of life. Athletes know that their muscles burn the most right before they grow stronger. Writers know that the hardest part of a story to write is often the chapter right before everything comes together. In relationships, the greatest conflicts often arise right before a breakthrough in understanding. It is in the moments of greatest pressure that the most profound changes are being formed. But in the middle of it, when we cannot yet see the outcome, it is easy to mistake the struggle for a sign that we are on the wrong path, instead of a sign that we are closer than we have ever been. In the Bible, there are countless stories of people who found themselves in the darkest moments, right before their greatest victories. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned. Years of suffering, years of waiting, years of wondering if the dreams he once had would ever come to pass. But just when it seemed like his story was stuck in a cycle of hardship, everything shifted. Overnight, he was elevated to a position of influence and authority, stepping into the purpose that had been waiting for him all along. If he had given up during the darkest moments, if he had let the weight of discouragement convince him that nothing would ever change, he would have walked away from the very promise that was just within reach. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, a journey that could have taken a fraction of that time. But right before they entered the land they had been waiting for, they faced one of their greatest tests. Would they believe the promise, even when the obstacles seemed overwhelming? Would they trust that what they had been waiting for was just on the other side of their struggle? Some of them lost faith at the very moment they were closest to stepping into their breakthrough. This is the pattern that repeats itself again and again. The darkest hour before the dawn, the breaking point before the breakthrough, the moment when everything in us wants to give up, wants to believe that nothing will change, is often the moment when change is right around the corner. But the enemy knows this too. That is why discouragement often intensifies right before a breakthrough. That is why fear and doubt grow louder when we are standing on the edge of something new. The pressure increases, not because we are far from the promise, but because we are closer than we think. Sometimes we misinterpret struggle as a sign to stop, when in reality it is a sign to keep going. A seed, when it is buried in the ground, is in complete darkness. It does not see the sunlight yet. It does not know how close it is to breaking through the soil. If the seed could feel, it might assume that the darkness means it will never grow, that the pressure of the soil is too heavy, that nothing is happening. But under the surface, everything is shifting. Roots are forming. The very conditions that seem like obstacles are actually what is nourishing it, strengthening it, preparing it for the moment when it will finally break through. In our own lives, we often stand in the place where we feel the pressure of waiting, the weight of uncertainty, the exhaustion of believing for something that has not yet come. And in those moments, it is easy to assume that because we cannot see the breakthrough, it must not be happening. But the reality is that some of the most important work happens beneath the surface, in the unseen places, in the moments when we are being stretched and refined in ways we do not yet understand. When you feel like giving up, when the night feels endless, when the burden feels too heavy to carry any longer, remember that this is often the very moment when things are about to shift. The darkness is not a sign of absence, it is a sign of transition. The struggle is not proof of failure, it is proof that something is breaking through. Faith is not just about believing, it is about movement. It is about stepping forward even when the path is unclear, even when doubt lingers, even when nothing seems to be happening. Too often, people wait for the perfect moment, the absolute certainty, the undeniable sign before they act. But breakthroughs do not come to those who stand still, waiting for everything to be laid out in front of them. They come to those who take steps, small, imperfect, hesitant steps that signal trust in something greater than what they can see. Throughout history, every great moment of transformation has begun with a step of faith. Noah did not wait for the rain to start falling before he built the ark. He started building long before there was any visible sign of a storm. Abraham did not wait for all the details to be clear before leaving his homeland. He moved toward a promise he could not yet see. The Israelites did not wait for the waters of the Red Sea to part before stepping forward. They moved, and the waters parted as they went. Again and again, the pattern is the same. Faith requires movement before clarity, before understanding, before the breakthrough fully arrives. This is one of the greatest challenges of faith. The human mind craves certainty, proof, and guarantees. It wants to see before believing, to have every answer before taking action. But faith operates in the opposite way. It calls for movement before confirmation. It asks for trust in the unseen. It requires stepping out of comfort zones, embracing risk, and believing that something greater is at work, even when there is no immediate evidence. Think about a person standing at the edge of a frozen lake. If they wait for absolute certainty that the ice will hold before taking a step, they may never move at all. But if they step out, trusting that the foundation beneath them is strong, they will find themselves in motion. The same is true in life. Those who refuse to move until they have every answer often remain stuck, while those who step forward in faith discover that the way becomes clearer as they go. Breakthroughs rarely happen in a single dramatic moment. They are often the result of many small, consistent steps taken over time. A person does not wake up one day and suddenly achieve their dream. They take small, often unnoticed steps in that direction every single day. A mountain is not conquered in one leap. It is climbed step by step. Faith in motion is what creates momentum, and momentum is what leads to transformation. There is a reason why fear often intensifies when a person is on the verge of something new. The mind resists uncertainty. It tells 1,000 stories about what could go wrong, why it is safer to stay where it is, why now is not the right time. But fear is not a sign to stop. It is often a sign that something important is on the other side. The greatest breakthroughs are often guarded by fear, but the only way to overcome that fear is to move through it. It is easy to admire the stories of great faith in hindsight, to look at those who stepped out and saw their lives transformed, to celebrate their victories, to be inspired by their courage. But in the moment before the outcome was clear, they faced the same doubts, the same uncertainties, the same hesitations. The difference is that they moved anyway. They did not wait until they felt completely ready. They did not wait until every obstacle disappeared. They took the first step and then the next. Sometimes faith in motion looks like making a decision even when fear is present. Sometimes it looks like continuing to show up even when nothing seems to be changing. Sometimes it looks like choosing to believe even when every circumstance suggests otherwise. The key is not in having all the answers, but in being willing to take the step anyway. People often assume that faith means feeling confident all the time. But true faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the willingness to move forward despite doubt. It is understanding that clarity comes in the journey, not before it. Those who wait for the fear to disappear before they act will wait forever. Because fear never fully disappears, it simply loses its power over those who choose to move despite it. In every area of life, progress happens through action. A person who dreams of writing a book but never puts words on the page will never see their story come to life. A person who longs for deeper relationships but never takes the risk of vulnerability will never experience true connection. A person who desires a change in their life but never takes the first step will remain exactly where they are. Faith is not just about belief, it is about movement. Even the smallest step can be the catalyst for something greater. A single act of courage can set a new path in motion. A simple decision to trust, even in the face of uncertainty, can open doors that seemed impossible to open. The key is not in knowing every detail of how things will unfold, but in trusting that as long as movement continues, the way will become clear. Breakthroughs do not happen to those who stand still, waiting for the perfect moment. They happen to those who step forward even when the path is uncertain. Faith in motion is what shifts things. It is what brings unseen possibilities into reality. It is what turns dreams into tangible experiences. The difference between those who experience breakthroughs and those who remain stuck is not in the level of their belief, it is in their willingness to move. Timing is one of the most challenging aspects of faith. It is human nature to want things to happen according to our own schedules, to see results immediately, to have prayers answered in the exact moment we ask. But one of the greatest lessons in life is that delays are not denials. What feels like waiting is often preparation. What seems like silence is often divine alignment. The timing of breakthroughs is never random. It is always intentional. There is a reason a seed does not grow into a tree overnight. The process of growth takes time. Beneath the surface, the roots must establish themselves, deepening into the soil, strengthening their foundation before anything visible appears. If a tree were to grow too quickly without developing strong roots, it would not survive the storms that come. The same principle applies in life. There are seasons of waiting, seasons of struggle, seasons where nothing seems to be happening, not because we are forgotten, but because we are being prepared for something greater than we can see. It is easy to become frustrated when things do not happen according to our timelines, when doors remain closed despite our efforts, when opportunities seem just out of reach, when prayers seem to go unanswered. In those moments, the temptation is to assume that nothing is happening, but the truth is that delay is often a sign that something is still being put into place. Just because we cannot see the progress does not mean it is not happening. Think about the story of Joseph. He had a dream as a young man that he would one day be in a position of great leadership, yet his path to that promise was anything but immediate. He was sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison, and spent years in circumstances that seemed to contradict the vision he had been given. From the outside, it may have looked like his dreams were never going to happen, but every setback was actually a setup. Every delay was shaping him, strengthening him, preparing him for the exact moment when his breakthrough would come. And when it did, it happened suddenly. One day he was in prison, the next he was in the palace. There is always a reason for the waiting. Sometimes we are being prepared for what is coming. Other times, the situation itself is being prepared for us. If a door has not opened yet, it may be because there are things that still need to align, people who still need to be in place, circumstances that still need to shift. A delay does not mean it will never happen. It simply means that the timing is not yet right. The challenge is that we often confuse delay with denial. We assume that because something has not happened yet, it must not be meant for us. But some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came after long seasons of waiting. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before entering the Promised Land. David was anointed king long before he actually took the throne. Even Jesus, though he was the Son of God, waited 30 years before stepping into his public ministry. In each case, the waiting was not wasted. It was a necessary part of the journey. Waiting is hard because it requires trust. It requires believing that even when nothing seems to be happening, something is, that even when doors are closed, they will open at the right time. It requires surrendering control, releasing the need to know exactly when and how things will unfold, and choosing to believe that the timing is being orchestrated in a way that is for our ultimate good. There are times when what we want is good, but the timing is not. A person may long for a certain opportunity, but if they step into it too soon, they may not be ready to sustain it. A relationship may have the potential to be beautiful, but if it begins at the wrong time, it may not flourish the way it was meant to. Timing is not just about receiving something, it is about receiving it at the right moment, when it can thrive. Patience is not passive. It is not about doing nothing and simply waiting for things to happen. It is about preparing, about staying faithful in the small things, about continuing to move forward even when the final breakthrough has not yet arrived. It is about trusting that when the time is right, everything will come together in a way that is better than anything we could have orchestrated on our own. Sometimes the waiting is where the most growth happens. The process of trusting, of continuing to believe, of staying steadfast, even when the outcome is uncertain, is what strengthens faith. It is easy to trust when everything is going according to plan. The real test is whether we can trust when things feel uncertain, when progress is not visible, when we are tempted to doubt. Those who learn to trust the timing are the ones who ultimately walk into the fullness of their breakthrough. A breakthrough that comes too soon is not truly a breakthrough. It is a shortcut. And shortcuts rarely lead to lasting results. There is a reason why some of the most successful people in the world speak of long years of struggle before their big moment arrived. Those years were not wasted. They were the foundation upon which everything else was built. The same is true in faith. When we trust the process, when we believe that delays are not denials, when we stay faithful even when the breakthrough is not yet visible, we position ourselves for something greater than we could have imagined. There will always be moments of doubt, moments of frustration, moments of wondering if what we are waiting for will ever happen. But every great story, every great breakthrough, every moment of transformation follows the same pattern: a period of waiting, of struggle, of uncertainty, followed by a sudden shift. The key is not to give up in the waiting. The key is to trust that the timing is never random, never accidental, but always, always intentional.